Alright, in this sixth video, I want to address multiband dynamic compression and basically frequency specific or frequency band specific compression. This whole concept is very simple. If you've got some really some really complex looking, multiband dynamics, because even this one to some people can be very intimidating. Because basically it's acting as, it's frequency specific or range specific compression and expansion, which can be really intimidating. First of all, I like plugins that do one thing. But in this type of plugin, it has to address two different issues, the frequencies and compression expansion. I don't know that I actually use it I might on this one. Sometimes you can do some really cool shaping. With your expander and as gating, or varying degrees of gating, to help really shape the timbre of what you're working on. And it works really well for like things that you have on samples and things like that are really great for this tool. This tool is awesome for that because you can really sculpt that sound really well. One of the things about multi-dynamics plugins that I have an issue with is sometimes they're not, I like this one right here, this multi-band dynamics, I can go isolate. I've got this track, right? And I'm trying to use some compression frequency dynamic. I'm figuring out where that starts and where it's going. I want to do some compression in that area. And depending on the program, how is it going to compress it? So you really want to take a look and see what it's doing, because some of them might do it a little bit differently and how it's affecting the frequency content. One like this is not real specific about what it's doing. And you can get real specific. You can come down, and this one will go into a certain range from 500 to 1K. The problem is when you get up higher, that those distances might change a little bit. Does that make sense? Because now you're not dealing with just like 500 to 1K, you might be going 500 to 10, or 2 to 4 or 5 or something, 2 to 3 or 4 or something. You got to really understand what the band is you're dealing with. But the cool thing is that the basic concept is you're attenuating frequencies, almost like doing some EQ work, frequency specific, and trying to compress it. Using a compressor, if you understand what a compressor does, which you should, and I have a video on it that gives you a basic understanding of it, that can be a very complex tool to do some very complex work. But the basic understanding of it is it basically is trying to compress things at various degrees of hardness, how hard it's compressing, and there's, a few different aspects of what that tool does that you need to understand how it affects the audio. But the basic concept is pretty simple. You can use it for complex things, but the basic concept of what it does is simple. And multiband dynamics can really be really cool through this series, of sound sculpting your spectral content, because you can be real specific and you can really get a range of what you're trying to do, and instead of just attenuating it with your EQ, go after it with, multiband compression that might affect the sound and the timbres a little bit differently. And if you don't understand about the compression, that compression can be a really cool tool to help color the sound, not just try to attenuate problem areas or peaks or, transients and things like that. It can actually be used to color what you're trying to do. So that's a cool way because it's frequency specific coloration. You can actually, you've got these two frequencies here, the first and second, or the first and second harmonic, of this vocal, and those two you want to really focus on. You don't really, these ones over here doing fine, or you want to focus on these ones over here. And combined with the automation that you can follow them around and do some real specific compression just in those frequency areas. Instead of just following around with EQ, you can go compress those areas so that they compress to how you want them. The one issue, and I hope that's real clear and very simple so that you don't get confused by this tool. of what it does, you know, and the simplicity of what it does. And I'm trying not to get lost in the complexity of how it might look or the concepts. Understand the basic concept of what it's doing and trying to do, and you're trying to use what you're trying to use it for. A lot of times, multi-band dynamics, you can use it for addressing transients or, you know, peaks or coloration in a whole new way by being frequency specific. So I hope I made that real clear and real simple so that doesn't get real complex. The complexities of what you can use it for. You can watch videos on things you can use it for I mean, there's quite a few out there, okay? So, but the basic concept of what it does, if you watch all the other videos and you use it in place of an EQ, that it might help you shape the timbers a little bit differently. And actually, instead of just actually attenuating it down, it's compressing it. And it's going to affect the whole thing differently. And you can affect a range differently with using compression rather than just trying to cut it out or squish it down, that it actually is compressing it down so much, you know, and it can affect it. I can go on all day about what all that might do, but it basically going to affect how it's coloring the timber by putting different degrees of attenuation and force onto those frequencies that you've specifically, you know, targeted. And that is a really cool concept to understand. And just mess around with it, you know, on, you know, pick a vocal track or a guitar track or something, and just try to work on some frequency content. Like up here, you got some kind of issue, you know, and, you know, in this area right in here on that vocal, automate it, and, you know, try to work on that area and see what it does when you start doing different types of compression, amounts of compression, different types of ratios, you know, and being real and widening the band, you know, how big the band is that you're trying to work with. And you can do different areas. You've got these two you want to work on right here, these two frequencies, and then you got this little area down here that's about 3 or 4 frequencies, and you've got them separated out. Does that make sense? To where, you know, you can sit there and say, well, I've got those banded out there in one area, and then I'm not even messing with that area, and I'm seeing them as here. Or you can drag that over there and say, well, I'm dealing with those right there, that little area right there, and then I'm dealing with these two little areas here. Or I'm skipping that area, and I don't want to mess with that at all, but those 2 frequencies and these 3 or 4 up in here, that I'm going to work on separately to do some compression work on them to help color the tone with compression. Frequency specific, targeted frequency specific compression, which is really cool concept to understand. And if you watched all the other videos and you've watched most of the videos on this channel, that you should have a very good concept of what that means and the cool tool that this is, what it can do when you're dealing with all those issues. And when you can bring it out and go, this might do something a little bit differently, or I'm having that issue and this will do it a little bit differently, and it's a whole new tool. So you really want to kind of mess around to understand what it does. One thing I do want to address, and so I hope I made that real clear, so that concept's real simple, so that when you pull one out, that it might look like Star Trek, dude, but you know, you understand what it's supposed to do and what its concept is. And so that you focus on what the concept and making it do that rather than focus on how complex it can look. Because some people get into this kind of stuff and they'll just look at it and go, oh, dude, you know, multi-band dynamics, where am I going to use that? Why? You know, and it's like, and they'll never hardly use it, or they'll use it for, you know, drum transients or something, you know, and it's like, that's it, you know, they don't really think about trying to actually spend time using it and automating it and really playing with it, because it does some cool things and can help color the mix or help color those tracks or groups differently than doing your EQ work some other way. So I hope I made that real clear, so that just the concept of what it does is really cool, and it is a cool tool that more than likely, if you've got a professional grade DAW, that you have one in there anyway, and you can probably get one anyway, and it would be a good idea to get one. It is an awesome tool. So I hope I made that real clear and very, very concise, and so that it's understood what that does and the simplicity of what it does. The other issue I want to address is this is another one that basically does the same type of thing. It's called Nova by TDR. And that Tokyo Dawn, this is really cool, and I like this one better sometimes. No offense to my dog, I think that thing is so cool, but I like music isn't a lot of times at the finite level and at the micro level, it's sinusoids and it's real precise. But the reality is music as a whole and a whole timbre flows a lot more. It's more rounded. It's not quite so, cut and dry, this section, that section, that section. It's not like that. It's more rounded. And it's like, this one I like because you can sit there and go after an area and automate it or whatever you're doing and do that compression in those frequency areas as it flows around, and it's a little bit more, it's a little bit more, it's a little bit more, it's the roundedness of it is what I think is the issue, is that it's acting more like my EQ, it's doing things my EQ would do, and also doing that compression in a nice rounded way, so that, because sometimes timbres aren't, this part here and then this part here and then that part there. Sometimes they are in the multi-band dynamics, if you use that automation, that when you're going through there, that you've got these two frequencies and you've automated them and they're just a little section like that, and you can, automate them, to where that section follows around, those frequencies, and that's, that kind of takes care of the problem. And that's very scientific and exact, and it is, and it works real well. And sometimes, it's like, I'll use it for different things. They both work a little bit differently, and a lot of them will work a little bit differently, but, that, I like this one sometimes. Sometimes I'll pull this one out because it's more rounded, and I'll spend less time trying to sculpt two different frequencies, and I'm really wanting to sculpt, this timbre going down like that. I really want to focus on that timbre and compressing that timbre, and I'll use maybe 3 or 4 or all these across here or 2 of them in line to really sculpt that timbre and the compression coming at it from all different kinds of angles to really contain it and let it breathe and come out the way I want it to. And I know that can sound seriously complex, and I'm not going to tell you it's not, because it is. It is a very complex thing. But if you understand the basic concept of what it's doing, as you do one part at a time, and you're focused on the primary frequency, and then you start focused on some of the following timbres, and then you're focused on some of the more compressed frequencies up in the upper area, and then you're focused more on containing this and compressing it in on the higher end, or compressing it down in the lower end, but letting it breathe some. If you deal with it one step at a time like that and try not to think about it as, oh, no, I gotta spend 4 hours, trying to figure out how to make this work, that one little step at a time, to understand what you're doing with each step and how each one of those steps and each one of those different compression settings on each one of those different ones that you're working with, how that's affecting the timbre. This one over here, I might put some more harder compression on it, or less, going to let it breathe more. This one I might compress a little harder, or I might let it breathe more. I might, use a higher ratio on it, or a harder knee, or whatever. And it's the awesome tool for that, for basically sculpting the sound and the timbres and addressing issues. You've got an issue that's going along in it, and you don't want to just completely compress the shit out of one frequency, that you basically kind of want to squish it down. And with either the multiband dynamics or with this, that it's more trying to compress it so it, evens out in some area that you're trying to shape it to come, trying to push it down a little bit and then let it come up and push it down and let it come up to try to breathe through it. And I know that sounds very complex, but, there's no really easy way to say that. It is a complex issue, but it's beautiful and it's so cool, dude. They're such cool tools to play with and to really be sculpting your sound. But the concepts are real simple about what it does, so don't get confused about why it was that it's all this stuff. That was a simple concept of what it does to help shape you, just like doing EQ work, but with some compression. And it's so cool, dude, and it's an awesome tool to add to your arsenal, and it will definitely help your mix. And you can use it in place of your EQ when you're doing your automation and stuff like that also. So I hope that was a real basic explanation, and peace, hope, love.